Hey, Tire Pod viewers, this is Ammar. I'm coming to you this time with a personal message. Normally, I come in alongside Shez and talk about the podcast, everything that we do with Formula One. But as many of you know, I am from Los Angeles, and the last 2 weeks have been nothing short of saddening. I can't even come up with the words. The amount of destruction that we've seen on account of the wildfires have just been amazing. While I myself and my family are fine, and my most immediate friends and family circle are thankfully not impacted by this. I know several friends, colleagues, neighbors that have been impacted by this horrible, horrible tragedy. So I come to you in acknowledgement of all of the words of wisdom and kindness that many of you have shown in these last few days. A few of you have asked how I'm doing. I am luckily, as you can see, doing just fine. But if you feel like helping in any which way possible, if you have any disposable income that you're so motivated to spend, I fully recognize that LA is an area that is generally well-to-do, and we have great resources, but I cannot tell you how this tragedy has impacted many people that are in deep and dire need of any help and assistance that they can get. So if you are so motivated to shell out a few bucks or a few pennies, whatever that might be, I'll throw in a few links of a couple of different organizations that are doing some great work that include the Red Cross, the World Kitchen. There's a California Wildlife Fund as well. And then there are several other areas that you can look up on the internet as well. But if you are willing and able to contribute, thank you so much. We'll pop the link in there and go ahead and enjoy this next episode.
Right, so hot on the heels of our last episode, Michael Schumacher, the greatest of all time, we're going to have a repost. A repost that may well answer some of the questions that you guys had in our comments. But let's see. As usual for these, I've got my friend and yours, BaxtyB. How are you, my friend?
I'm coming down with a cold, but it's all right. I'll live. Like, it's fine.
Mate. Oh, mate. Well, we've got something meaty for you to get your teeth stuck
Yeah,
into, so hopefully that
Mm,
will
mhm.
batter the cold into submission.
I hope so.
Uh,
Yeah.
and Ammar, how are things
All is
on
well.
the West Coast?
T minus 40 days. No, what are we looking at for testing starting? Like I can't wait to get glued to all of this and absorb an inordinate amount of caffeine because that's what I would do watching 3 days of testing. So
That's it. The talking stops, the engines
that's it.
start.
There you
But
go.
until then, you're going to have to put up with us talking about things that have been. Um, right, Baxty, tell me, Lewis Hamilton, greatest of
Yeah.
all time.
Oof.
Pourquoi?
Oh, I mean, there's all of the statistical charts that he's just on top of. Most race wins, most pole positions, uh, probably most points scored. Like the list is, you could just find so many different things that he just tops the list. But that doesn't make him the greatest. It's what he's done and the context he's done it in. So look at his first season as rookie. Ron Dennis of all people. Let's not forget who we're talking about. We're talking about Ron Dennis, one of the most brutal, had the highest standards of any. Well, him and Frank Williams together, some of the highest standards of their drivers. That's what they require, and he felt that Lewis Hamilton was up to scratch to go alongside defending champion Fernando Alonso. Not only does Lewis Hamilton prove him right, he exceeds the expectation that was put upon him, is challenging for the title in his first year. And there'll be people saying, oh, it's all the car, it's all the car. Yeah, but look at the guy in the other car. Look at the guy in the other car. It's not like he's up against, Pedro de la Rosa, who he was up against for the seat. He was up against Fernando Goddamn Alonso, who had just beaten Michael Schumacher the year before. And Lewis, on countback, beat him, and he was a whisker away from winning the title that year. Had basically McLaren not played silly buggers with pit stops in China, he probably would have won that title. Then the next year, he backed it up. He proved he wasn't just a one season wonder, and he won the title in the most crazy circumstances. With the last lap passes, Glock, everything else. And then of course there was the drop from McLaren, but Lewis was still winning. He was still getting results. 2009 that car was a dog, but McLaren worked their backsides off, got it back, and he still took two unbelievable victories. Took a lot of pole positions that year because he showed over one lap he was still the guy over one lap. Is the oft forgotten man in the 2010 title fight. 2011 probably the last worst year of his McLaren career. 2012, there are many that feel he was one of the best driver of the year. I don't agree with that, but one of the best drivers that year. It's just his McLaren, fell apart if he breathed on it the wrong way. Um, and then he went to Mercedes, a move that everybody said, "What the hell are you doing? Why would you go there? You're in McLaren. McLaren are the team. McLaren, they're great." And he went to Mercedes and he created a dynasty. Yeah, and it wasn't like he just jumped in the best car, had a patsy teammate, and he went up against Nico Rosberg, who I feel is one of the most disrespected drivers in history. People just say, "Oh well, he beat Lewis Hamilton once, but he's not that good. He's not that." No, he is top draw, and I think made Lewis better. And the battles they had showed how hard Lewis had to work to beat him 2 of the 3 seasons that they had championship winning material. Then he goes up against his generational rival in Sebastian Vettel. He handles him twice, beats him. You know, and in years where you could make arguments that the Ferrari was the fastest car in that year, I think 2017 more so than 2018. But that's always open for debate. And then he kind of hit his peak 2019, 2020 when he was just dominant. And I think it does. If they had had competition that year, he wins. He was that good. Yeah, and the thing that drew me to Lewis was he has this ability to shock you in ways he can do something and he's like, how the hell have you done that? And going around the outside of Alonso in your first race. This is a kid who's not raced in Formula One before, 2-time world champion ahead of him, and he's just like, I don't care who you are, I'm going around the outside. See you later. Like, whoa, okay. And then that 2018 pole lap in Singapore, faster than the computer prediction, like the best computer predicted lap, he went faster than it. And that's just the on track stuff, and then you got all the off track stuff to go with it as well. He's become an icon, a beacon for so many people. He is one of a kind. He There is a reason why Ferrari were willing to make the move for him. It not just for on track and off, but off track as well. They feel like he could bring so much to them, not just as a driver, but as a brand. And in these last few years at Mercedes, okay, 2024 was not a good year. It was a bad year for Lewis, but he still took 2 race wins and still showed that when he was comfortable in that car and he got everything right and he could extract the maximum performance that he could out of that car, he was still arguably the fastest guy on the grid in that absolute dirt box of a Mercedes. And for me, he's always there. Like, he is just always at the forefront of the sport. And he took Michael Schumacher, and Ron Meadows said this when talking about Lewis, and this is the greatest compliment that I think you could pay Lewis, is that he took Michael Schumacher's work ethic and he upped the game. Ron Meadows didn't have to say that. He could have just said, Lewis worked really hard, but he made a point of going out there and saying Lewis took the work ethic to another level. And the way he thinks about things, when he's doing all of this off-track stuff, like doing his fashion shows and everything else, and people going, "Oh, he should be doing that," and then he drops the Singapore pole lap, and you're just thinking, how can I beat someone who's doing 5 other different things, and yet he can still turn up and deliver performance like that? He's not distracted. He's got different levels of brain space and brain capacity that, us mortal humans clearly don't have. The way he's just been able to it's just, I could wax lyrical about Lewis for so long, but it's the wheel to wheel battles, the never give up, the late braking, the just unbelievable speed, and that just, for me, he is the greatest ever. Like, he saw Michael's bar and saw it as a challenge to go better, and he's nearly there. He just needs that 8th championship to sort of rubber stamp it.
Powerful stuff. I mean, how can you argue with that? Stats and feeling, but there's always a counter argument. Ammar, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah.
Do you agree with everything that Baxty said, or is there something
You
to
know,
dig into?
no, I agree with everything you said, Baxty. It is difficult, if not damn near impossible, to argue about Lewis's credentials, right? I think that the best way that I would summarize what you have described about him is he's a transcendent athlete that is now going to a transcendent team and a transcendent sport, and it's happening at the right time. And maybe there's magic left in the Lewis armor to for us to see, and maybe we will see that magical eight title that has eluded him in what I imagine is a very painful way, right? So it is impossible to debate any of what you've laid out in terms of Lewis's credentials, the way he shot up on the scene, got promoted to a Formula One team as early as he did. And back when he did, I'm not even sure anyone had sort of made it to a Formula One team in that quick succession. Then to go toe to toe with Alonso that year, and then almost lost the championship, right? And we know what the story of that year was, but that was legendary stuff. The one place that I will have a little bit of pause back, Steve, and what I would say is that I think that Lewis has actually kind of struggled against some of his teammates. No, I mean, and look at some of the competition as well. So let's start with the teammates first, right? So we've seen his recent struggles against George Russell in this sort of last phase. Now, you might put it down to Mercedes being a box, and I 100% agree with you. There's a little bit of that. But George Russell has shown real potential with the car, where Lewis himself has come out and said, "Look, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with the way I qualify. I'm struggling with the way the car handles, et cetera, et cetera." So I would sort of look at that as something that would give me a little bit of pause, but then let's sort of go back a ways too, right? So in his rookie season, he obviously lost to Alonso, and that was a really close battle. So I wouldn't put it down there. I wouldn't take too much out of it too. But then you add the fact that when he was paired up against Jenson Button, I believe that he lost to Jenson in the 2011 standings, but then also over the course of their 3-year time frame that they were together, I think Jenson outscored him. There's that. Then there's the 2016 season when he lost the title to Nico. Of course, you'd come back to me and say, "Well, look, he's dominated Nico throughout the rest of their time together." But I do think that if we're talking about the greatest of all time, right? I sort of look at it as a Michael Jordan-esque, right? Like 6-0 in the NBA Finals, never lost kind of a thing. And I do think that though that there's one element of that I'd sort of present as something that would give me a little bit of pause in sort of anointing him the GOAT per se. But
Okay, so I will come back on that.
mm,
There's a fundamental difference here between Lewis and Michael in some ways. So in my view, Michael wanted to be the number one guy at the team. Like, I am the guy. You can have a second driver, but he ain't winning. When I'm here at the team, he ain't winning anything. Eddie Irvine was the only reason he was able to fight for that title was because Michael broke his leg, and Michael did not help him realistically to win that title. He could have, but he chose not to. Um, Whereas Lewis has no problem. He does not care who the other guy in the car is. He'll just be like, right, put somebody in that car, I'll beat him. Yeah, and yeah, Jensen beat him on points across their 3 years together as teammates, but Lewis won 2-1 in seasons. You know, when there was a championship on the line, Lewis was the only one who got to the final race in 2010. As I said, the oft forgotten man of that 2010 title decider, because everyone forgets he was had a chance because he was so far back. And Lewis is now going to Ferrari against Charles Leclerc. Like, I mean, you'd think a 40-year-old Lewis Hamilton going up against the young buck in Charles Leclerc, who, in my view, is probably at the moment the fastest driver over one lap. And Lewis is like, yeah, I'll go to your team. I don't care. I'll beat you. That's just his attitude. His absolute ironclad will and belief in himself that I will beat whoever is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, and I'm not saying Michael didn't have that. Michael did have that, but Michael wanted to have the team around him. It's like, I want the team. Yeah, and that there's two different ways to go about winning in Formula One. They're both with their merits. And I'm not criticizing Michael for doing that. That's how he chose to go about his business. If Ferrari were like, no, we're going to put Mika Hakkinen in the other car, Michael would just be like, okay, fine, I'll still beat him anyway. And he would have, and I think he probably would have beaten Mika in equal machinery. Um, But Lewis just he doesn't care. Like Nico Rosberg, yeah, I'll beat him. Valtteri Bottas, yeah, I'll beat him. Yeah, George Russell, yeah, I'll beat him. Yeah, George may have beaten him 2-1 in seasons, but Lewis scored more points. Yeah, and that came down to that last lap pass he did in Abu Dhabi last year. Um, so that's the same Jenson Button stat inverted. And Lewis's competition, I think, also like he's gone up against some amazing drivers. Like, okay, he didn't catch Michael at his best because this was the 3 year Michael at Mercedes. So I'm not going to count Michael in this one, but Fernando beat him because he won on count back in that 2007 season. Um, Jensen beat him. Vettel in those 2 years when it really mattered, beat him. When it was just them, and Vettel didn't have the Red Bull car advantage, and Lewis was able to really compete. Lewis beat him. Raikkonen, I know Raikkonen beat him in 2007. That's fair. But Lewis then went and proved, okay, you beat me. You had to go through that to beat me in my rookie season. That's not going to happen again. So I think Lewis's level of competition exceeds Michael's. And I think that's also partly because I think there just were better caliber of drivers around in Lewis's era than there has been in Michael's. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention Max at this point, because Max has been there or thereabout the last few years. And obviously, 2021, Lewis elevating his performance levels again because he's like, okay, Max, you're throwing down the gauntlet. I see what you're bringing, but I'll still beat you. I need to win these last 4 races. I will win these last 4 races, and he nearly did it. Yeah. And as I said, he will go to Ferrari and think, I'll beat him. I'll beat Charles Leclerc. Don't matter. I'll beat him.
All right, Shez.
Oof. Yeah. Again, good freaking answers to some tough questions. But we've had some tough observations in our comments. I'm going to try and hit you with a couple of them as we go. The first one is again about teammates. Right. This is from me more than anyone though. As I said before, I do agree that in terms of the names that Lewis was up against, they were bigger names and in theory more difficult rivals, right? But who did he actually win his 2008 title against?
Felipe Massa.
Yeah, Felipe Massa. Is he one of these drivers that you think
won.
is right up there in the
Also
highest
barely won.
echelons of Formula One history?
No. But I think Ferrari bungled that drivers' championship. To be honest with you, I actually think Ferrari had the quickest car in 2008.
Yeah, I do too. So you reckon that actually Felipe Massa probably should have won that title if it hadn't been for a Hungarian blowout? Probably would have won that one.
And the Singapore nonsense, but
And the
I mean, that
Singapore
was out of his
nonsense as well.
control.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So even that title against Felipe Massa, who's not really anywhere near the top 20 greatest drivers of all time, that one. Raikkonen, even in 2007 on the
easy.
Bridgestone controlled tyres, wasn't really the Raikkonen of old. Yeah, he won the 2007 title by default, really. And in 2008, he just fell away. I mean, there are entire articles about why Kimi Raikkonen didn't perform in 2008. It's a funny season for you, Ammar. Like, just on a tangent, he got more fastest laps.
Now.
More fastest laps than anybody else, but just nowhere near actually defending his 2007 title. The only driver really that was in there consistently up against him was Fernando Alonso. And one of the comments that we had in response to our last video was, well, if Fernando Alonso had been in that 2010 McLaren or had been in that 2012 McLaren, probably would have won the title. What would you say to that?
No.
Pourquoi?
I don't think because the Red Bull existed, and you also had probably the best version of Sebastian Vettel at that point as well, and that was a marriage made in heaven. Do I think Lewis delivers the level of performance Fernando Alonso did in that 2012 Ferrari? I think he gets close, but I don't think he takes the title to the last race. I think that was just a unique situation for Fernando to flourish. But I think if that 2012 McLaren had been more reliable, Lewis would have definitely been in that title fight, 100%.
Well, the McLaren was the faster car, right?
100%. Yeah.
And you can argue that Fernando, in terms of what he demands from a team, much like Michael Schumacher, would have galvanized that team better than Lewis did.
I mean, 2012 was complicated with the fact that he was leaving. Like, and there was definitely a
But
shift
they didn't know
toward
that in the middle of the season, though, because
no,
he made
no,
that
but
decision after Singapore, didn't he? And that was only like 5 or 6 races from the end.
yeah. But I don't think Fernando wins the title in a 2010 McLaren or a 2012 McLaren. I don't think he does because, as I said, the Red Bull existed, and that was if it was just a straight fight between McLaren and Ferrari, you could probably make that argument, but you can't because unless they're sat in the Red Bull. Do I think both those drivers win that title in a Red Bull? Yes, I do. Against Sebastian Vettel, but to say that Fernando would win the title in those McLarens, no. And to be fair, I don't think Lewis would win the title in those Ferraris because the Red Bull's there.
Okay. Uh, we might have to disagree on that on the 2012 one because I think
That
Lewis
car
was
was too
unlucky.
unreliable.
I think he
That
was.
that
I think he was unlucky. I think too many drivers decided to drive into him. Maldonado and
Grosjean, yeah,
Grosjean, especially, and McLaren seemed bent on not performing a normal pit stop for some reason. It was a weird season because
yeah.
it was like if you had Ferrari's operational and strategy now, which is perverse to say, really,
I know,
with
crazy.
McLaren's mental with McLaren's car. I think that was a done deal. Like, Red Bull shouldn't have been anywhere near that
But that
championship.
car was unreliable as well. It was.
Well, so is the Red Bull. Sebastian Vettel
Uh,
had 3 alternator failures. Three,
did he? I
yeah,
don't remember
three
that.
alternator.
Uh,
Valencia. That's how Alonso won there.
that was the big one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then another one in Italy, and then he had another one somewhere else as well. So there were 3 alternator failures,
Mm.
3 blown engines.
What's your
Um,
point, though? What's the point?
but
What's your
but,
point with the
but no,
20?
that was just a tangent onto 2012. The other one is okay. I take your point about Lewis Hamilton wanting to prove himself against the fastest drivers. I don't care what the competition is. I'll beat them. But I would argue that the main objective of any Formula One driver, right, any elite Formula One driver, is to win as many races and as many championships as possible. Agree or disagree?
Agree. And if we're
Right?
talking about Lewis, he's done that more than anyone.
Yeah. But the easiest way to do that is not to have someone strong in the other car, right? And I would flip that argument on its head. And I would say that Michael and Max now, although Max to a slightly lesser extent, because I think if you put anyone in the car against Max,
It's not
they're
gonna happen.
getting hammered right now. Um, just in that Red Bull with the way that the team sort of built around it, I don't see anybody else. But Michael and Max are both like, look, you to their team, you have hired me to win races and win championships. So don't put somebody in the car that's going to challenge me. This is why Sainz didn't get into that car for next year, for this year, because they're like, look, you're not helping me. And actually, having the driver in the car opposite them that can compete, that is comfortable with the car when even when Lewis is, means that the car isn't fully honed to everything that Lewis wants. And that's what Max and Michael did. They were able to take the car so far towards what they needed the car to do that, fine, it made it undrivable for the guy in the other car, on the other side of the garage. But it meant that there was no doubt about a championship. Right? There was no doubt about 2017 or 2018 going to anybody other than Lewis, if that is the
So
situation.
there are
And actually, last little point on this: the big stain for me, the big stain that proves that point is 2016. There is no way that Michael or Max would have let that happen, even with Nico Rosberg in the car. That it just doesn't happen.
no.
How do you explain that away?
Okay, so I'll give so the first point on the not being tailored to him and everything else. 4 seasons prove that exception.
Which 4 seasons?
2008, 17, 18, and 21. What is the common denominator in all four of those seasons? He was the driver going up against another driver from another team. So Massa in 08, Vettel in 17, 18, and Verstappen. And that is when his teams were like, right, Lewis, you are our guy. Go and deliver us championships. And he didn't win rate as many races that year because he had genuine competition from another fantastic driver who was taking race wins from him, and it was track to track and everything else, and so that shows that when they would fully invest behind him when they needed to, and I think Lewis was more than happy for that to happen because he's like, look, I'm the guy that can beat that guy, back me. But in seasons where they were dominant, it's like, okay, well, I've got Nico. Me and Nico, we'll fight, but I'll beat him. It's fine. And then Bottas in 1920s, like, yeah, I've got him sorted. Don't worry, I'll beat him. Now, you mentioned 2016. I think 2016, I'll be honest, Lewis underperformed, particularly in those first few races, which is what allowed Nico to build his buffer. But Lewis then, in the second half of that season, began to just flex his muscles and be like, no, it's fine. I'll win this championship. And then his engine blew up in Malaysia, which obviously there's nothing you can do about that. Now, Michael and Max can't stop that from happening. If an engine blows, an engine blows. Doesn't matter who you are. Like, it goes. Would they have had that level of performance that Lewis did? No, probably not. But that is sometimes the mercurial element of Lewis, that sometimes he can just have a little patch where you're like, oh, is he going off the boil? And then he'll just go, oh, I'll just go drop 4 race wins in July or something, and absolutely cream Rosberg at every opportunity in those races, and just remind him that I'm the boss. And and also his desire to fight in that year as well. The way he was holding Nico up in the last race, going, I'm going to try everything to win this race and have Nico finish far enough behind, and I'm going to do everything I can without basically doing a Michael and running him off the road. That's the one line I don't think Lewis would ever cross, is run somebody off a road to win a championship. Because I remember Mark Webber saying in 2021, he said Lewis could easily have stuck his front wing on Max's rear tyre and taken him out of the race. But he didn't do that because that's not how Lewis works.
Okay, I like it. But that whole point about how, and this was true 2014, 15, 16, 17. It was only until 2021 that Lewis really sorted this out. But the start to his seasons, I've gone back and watched 2016 and 2018 recently, and up until Hockenheim, Lewis is so up and down. Like there's no, you don't know which Lewis is going to turn up at a race. And when I look back at 2021, I look back at like the reviews of that and what Max said about his performance, and also you look backwards at how Michael performed in his, not just his championship seasons, but in the seasons where Ferrari was still building. The one thing that you could always say was that there was no doubt at the end of a race that Michael and Max have got the absolute maximum out of that car every single race. You can rely on them. Everything else might be a variable. Like the engine might blow up, the pit stops might be a complete mess, but Michael and Max are going to be there no matter what, and that drags the rest of the team up. And is it not a failing on Lewis's part? Like, part of the reason that he didn't win 2016 because he didn't turn up at the beginning of the season. Like, I know that he had problems with his starts and he went off and did hundreds and hundreds of practice starts in the simulator. But when you talk about instances like Baku that year, that's a great example of the team telling their 2 drivers, you need to make an engine setting. We can't tell you what that is. And Nico Rosberg just going, blah, 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 done. And Lewis going, I don't know what to do, and losing a race because of it. And ultimately, it's moments like that lose him championships. So how can we turn around and say that Lewis is the greatest when he has major off days like that? Either of you can answer this, because I think this one's open to debate.
He learnt from his mistakes, though. That's the thing. Like, the thing with Lewis is when he makes a mistake, he very rarely makes it again. Very rarely. Okay, he might make a mistake wheel to wheel, but that's the nature of racing. But something like that, like, oh, I don't know how to do that, or my starts are bad, I'm going to go away and rectify it. And then I mean, look at him now. He's the best starter on the grid. Like, and he's been, well, probably Alonso aside, but his reaction times last year at 39 years old were the best on the grid.
Point taken. But in
Yeah,
2016, he's 9 years into his Formula One career, right? Why is it taking him till 2016 to start getting his starts right? Why?
because he
Why does
had
it?
the
And
inherent speed. He had the inherent speed to basically overcome his own
yeah,
shortcomings.
but does that not
But then
sound like?
he then came up against an opponent who just took everything. Yeah, and we're doing Nico Rosberg a disservice here. We're saying, oh,
Mm.
Lewis
Oh
throw.
yeah,
Nico was unbelievable in 2016, and the levels he went to basically destroyed him as a top level performer. That's why he retired. He's like, I can't maintain this for any more than I have done, so I have to step away. And I think Lewis's inherent talent and inherent speed kind of kept him in that fight. I think any other driver, I think, would have crumbled under the pressure that Nico had put them under. But Lewis's talent got him there, and that season then led to what we got in 17, 18, 19, and 20 because Lewis learnt so much from that defeat. He was like, okay, I need to go away and work on my starts. I need to work on my consistency. Yeah, and he just got better and better and better across those 4 years, which culminated in what I think is actually probably his best ever championship winning season in terms of his level of performance in 2020. Yeah, because he was just so brutal and rock solid. Every time you turned up to a race, you thought, well, unless something happens, Lewis is going to win.
and I agree with that. I do agree that from 2017 onwards, it was like every season he comes back and he's a bit stronger. You talk to well, I haven't talked to any of them, but they have said this in interviews. But you talk to people like Ron Meadows, and you talk about uh, you talk to Andrew Shovelin. They say that the biggest thing about Lewis is that every season he came back and he was a bit stronger. But my argument is that he had time to sort that out when he wasn't in cars that were competing for championships. And the fact that he had to learn it in 2016 is part of the reason why he is not standing here going to Ferrari as an 8-time world champion already. Let's take 2021 out of it, right? That was a, yes, that was a, whatever happened at the
Hmm.
end of that season. There are other points in his career at which he could have won championships when he didn't. And I would argue that Michael and Max were so hell bent and still are. Max is still hell bent on eliminating any weakness as soon as it's identified, that it never rears its head at any point later in their career. Ammar, I want to bring you in on this because I feel like you've probably got some stuff to say,
Well,
and me and Baxty are
you know
kind
what? I
of
think
going
that
for it.
the challenge with this argument is we are psychoanalyzing the mind of a champion, right? And I actually agree with Baxi on this one. The fact that Lewis lost the 2016 season, I think elevated him to this next level where he went on and on this dominant run too. So I would agree with Baxi in that he came back, he learned his mistakes, and he came. And look, sometimes you're only going to react to what you react to, right? And Max has something different in front of him in terms of his challenges that he has to overcome. Michael had his own. Lewis had his own. I think the greatest compliment to Lewis in this regard is after winning the 2016 championship, Nico Rosberg said, "See you later," because I don't want to do this anymore, right? And I think that in some ways is a mark of respect to a great driver, a great champion who is going to be laser focused on winning and winning alone. Look, for me, if there's anything that sort of is a bit of an indictment, and this is going to lead into a question for both Bax to you and Shez, you also can react to it, right? Is what has happened in the aftermath of the 2021 season, right? Shez, many times I've told you that the pain of losing is far greater than the joy of winning. So in some ways, those 7 championships don't mean anything if there isn't an eighth now, right? And not having won that eighth in 2021 and having seen Lewis struggle in this new era of the Formula One regulations and cars and the way they're designed, I think that is probably going to end up being the greatest indictment against a Lewis being a GOAT sort of an argument. Now, his career is not ended, so I don't want to be unfair and say, oh, yeah, we can sign off on it and boom, that's it. That's all we're done. So here's my question to you guys. What if We're expecting Lewis Hamilton to be with Ferrari for at least 2 years, maybe longer, but let's just assume for the sake of argument, 2 years. He doesn't win the eighth championship. What happens to this debate? Because then you would have had since 2021, what is it? One, two, three, four, five, maybe arguably 6 seasons where he's not won a championship. And for most of the 6 years, again, I don't know how the next 2 years will go, but the last 3 years, he was not even in the mix of it. Agreed. That's a Mercedes issue more so than a Lewis issue, but history will reflect on it. How? How will you reflect on it?
Baxter, you go.
I mean, look, the last 3 years at Mercedes have not been great. We can't deny that. I think his 2023 season is often slept on, and I think that's partly because just Max wiped the floor with everybody. But Lewis nearly got second in that championship. Like he was just so consistent in 2023 because he found a good balance with that car. Like you're only as good as your car. You had Max Verstappen fans coming out last year and saying, put Max Verstappen in a Haas and he will win. Well, he couldn't even win in a Red Bull that wasn't to his liking. So, you're only as good as your car, but it's what you do with that car that defines you. Michael Schumacher winning 5 straight titles with that car, defined him. Lewis Hamilton winning 6 championships with Mercedes defined him. And Max Verstappen winning 4 championships in a Red Bull has defined him. Lewis has still found ways to extract performance from those bad Mercedes. 2022 was a struggle town, and I think there was some lingering hangover from 2021 that definitely I think affected him. But 2023 I thought was definitely his best year of those three, and 2024. I mean, we've all seen the conspiracy theories online about sabotage and blah blah blah, but how much was his performance down to the fact that he was like, he's got one eye on Ferrari? And I don't blame him for that because he made that decision so early and it hung over the sport all year. It was all people, it was always there in the back of your mind of Lewis is going to Ferrari next year. And now we're nearly there. We're nearly at the time when they show us the picture of him in the overalls and it's all going to be, it's going to break the internet when it happens. But, Lewis showed, as I said, in those 3 years, he showed when he could get the performance out of the car, he still had the speed, and he could still deliver results. Look at Las Vegas last year when he made that mistake in qualifying, held his hands up, said, "Yeah, that was me. I made a mistake," and he then just absolutely ripped everyone apart from George because George was in the right position. But if Lewis had been further up the grid, he wins that Vegas race easily, in my view. But that's a coulda, woulda, shoulda. He still delivered an amazing performance on the day.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. As always, Ammar, I don't think having an eighth title suddenly magically makes him the greatest of all time because for me it's not about the numbers. It's about how they do it and what each of those performances represents. Like Lewis has won championships in 3 different technical rule sets in 2 different manufacturers' cars, right? Like there's only a handful of drivers that have even won championships in more than one type of car. Michael Schumacher's one of them. I also think that even if he goes to Ferrari and tanks it, do we think that Michael Schumacher is any less of a driver because of the last 3 seasons that he had at Mercedes? No. In fact, most people
But that was Mercedes, Shez. That's Mercedes. That's not Ferrari. That was an up and coming Mercedes. Those are apples and oranges. We're talking about Ferrari.
Ferrari are not a dominating championship winning team yet. They haven't done it. They didn't even come second in the title race last year. So no, but that people are very happy to put 10, 11 and 12 to one side and just talk about Michael's Ferrari and Benetton and Jordan years. Very, very happy to do that. But as soon as we're talking about Lewis, who, by the way, had a much better 22 to 24 than Michael did a 10 to 12, miles better, right? People are still happy to talk about that. But that even if he doesn't win another title, I still think there is enough evidence on which to assess his where he stands up in the GOAT debate. And I don't think you need to take those into account because even Max, as great as he is, will hit a car at some point unless he's massively lucky that just doesn't suit him. And you saw what happened to him at the beginning of 22 and 23 when the car doesn't quite suit him. That aura of impregnability goes away, right? It's suddenly like every race, or maybe Checo might get a pole position here, and then the car gradually goes back to what Max likes again. He's in his happy place, and we suddenly see Max, who is unbelievable again, because that is the level. That's the level that makes you the greatest of all time. It's what you do in a car that suits you, because that's what it is about. It is a meld of man and machine. And what we're talking about here is who has taken that to the greatest level.
Yeah.
And my argument about Lewis, right, and I do come back to Nico again. Yes, I understand what you're saying, that Nico had to take himself to such a great level that he then quit at the end of the season. But Nico is not anywhere near this GOAT debate, right? If Nico had been an elite driver in the sense of a Max Verstappen,
Oh, you-
then it's a different conversation, right? We're not talking about Lewis beat Max in the same car and Max had to quit. We're talking about him beating Nico Rosberg and Nico Rosberg had to quit. That it's not the same level. And what I would argue is that somebody like Michael and Max, driving at the highest level that they can drive at, the consistency that they show wouldn't have put them in a position where Nico Rosberg's anywhere near to capitalize on an engine blowout in Malaysia. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, so Shez, the only thing I'll push back on with this idea that Michael wouldn't have allowed anyone in the same car next to him win, and that Lewis somehow did. I don't think for me it's an indictment or Lewis or vice versa or a plus for Max or Michael in that regard. Look, I think it takes great strength to say, go ahead and put anyone you want in that car. I'll take care of them no matter what. Now, the outcome may not have been exactly what you would have hoped for all the time. You're gonna win a lot and you're gonna lose some. That's going to happen. That doesn't take away from greatness, in my opinion. That you can lose some along the way too. It's the way you lose. And so I'll come back to my initial question, right? And the way I would answer it. I think the eighth title is absolutely needed for Lewis because, as I said in the last debate, I think he's a step above Michael, but I think it's debatable in some ways. An eighth title puts him firmly in the GOAT conversation without argument, not just surely because of the numbers, but under the circumstances in which he would need to win now. Look at what we have in terms of competition now in this era. We know McLaren have two drivers that can win. We know Charles Leclerc is the next guy in the waiting, if that's what you want to kind of put him in. We know that George Russell and Kimi Antonelli could possibly be really, really good and competitive there. And then we have Max standing in the way. So for Lewis to win that eighth title, in my opinion, would then sort of shut the door. We wouldn't be able to have this debate. We would just have to say greatest of all time and move on. That's why I would argue that an eighth is required, not necessarily because of the statistics, because they're already in his favor. Most wins, most poles, yada, 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 many, many other statistics that are out there, right? There's no arguing that. But I think it's what would be etched in our memory from a symbolic nature, especially having lost in 2021 to come back and then win. I think everyone loves a good comeback story, guys. That's the thing that we're waiting for with Lewis. And I think we're genuinely, no matter what camp you're in, even Max will come out and tell you that 2021 was painful, right? He's already alluded to that. So I think there's something about that that I would like to see happen in terms of just sort of putting him in that echelon of untouchable. Forget it.
Yeah. So let me just a couple of points that I want to say. So the first one is what another thing that makes Lewis so great is just his mentality to keep going. Like he's been at the front of Formula One since 2007. Yeah, he didn't work his way up to that. He was plopped straight into it because one of the greatest team principals ever saw something in him and said, "Yeah, he's ready. Send him off." And since then, yeah, he's been there for 18 seasons now, just going and going and going and the desire to win and win and win. Nico Rosberg did that for 3 years and quit because it took so much out of him. Lewis has been doing that for 18 years. And it's a testament to his just what's the word I'm looking for? His sustainability as an athlete, his strength, his mental toughness, his mettle. Yeah, he is unbelievable in that regard. The other one is the way in which he races. Now, I said he's not a dirty driver. Yeah, of course he'll give run Nico Rosberg off the road occasionally, or just send Max Verstappen a little bit wide. But would he pull a Michael in 97? No. Would he pull a Max in Mexico last year? No, he wouldn't. Lewis races hard, but he races fair. Look at his battle with Alonso in Bahrain in 23. There's no championship on the line for that, but it's just a really great example. The history that those two have, you know, and we know that Alonso occasionally, if he could, would often not, drive into him, but would often make life very hard for him and might occasionally just, show him off the road. Um, but the two of them had the respect to just know where the lines were. And it was like you could have put a cigarette paper between them, but they knew exactly where the other was going to be. And they also had the confidence in each other. And Fernando had the confidence in Lewis that he knew that Lewis wasn't going to run him off the road.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Um, I think that longevity does come down to what you value again, right? Like if Senna hadn't been lost in his prime, um, you have to wonder how many seasons he could have kept going at the level that he was going at, right? Because that level of I have to be the fastest in every session, every single time. I have to absolutely obliterate my teammate no matter what. I have to have the best equipment all the time, and if it means I have to run people off the road, that's what I'm going to do. I think it was a slightly different mentality for Senna. We're going to do a Senna episode at some point as well. But with Michael, it was certainly a kind of I have done absolutely everything to get there. I don't understand why Jacques Villeneuve is still managing to get past me. So I have to run him off the road. There is no other way. And perhaps there is something of merit in what Lewis does. But the flip side to that is, well, why is he doing that? Why is he wanting to have a race? Does he not want to win the championship enough, or is it too much of I want to win in the right way? I don't know. And this is an open argument, right? This isn't that's the right way and what Max does is the wrong way. I don't think it can be painted that black and white. It does come down to what you believe in terms of like what is the greater philosophy, like what do you hold in more esteem? Do you hold more esteem in a driver that maximizes absolutely everything all of the time, including putting their teammate in the dustbin and having the team just focus on them, or do you value the driver that values that has the self-confidence in themselves that they are quicker than everybody else and they will beat everybody else come what may? That I think is what this ultimately comes down to, and that they're the two. Again, these are the archetypes that I talk about, but those are the two different kinds of drivers that we're talking about. And I don't think necessarily one is better than the other, but that's why this is a subjective argument, isn't it? I think at that point we should probably call it, but that was actually quite a fun argument. I hope that some of the comments that came up in the Michael video got answered a little bit here, because I did find it interesting that we did an entire video about Michael Schumacher and the comments were all about Lewis Hamilton. I guess that says something about Lewis. Anyway, as usual, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one. We will reply to as many as we possibly can. You can find BaxtyB where can they find you, BaxtyB?
You can find me on Twitter at BaxtyB, on Threads at BaxtyBF1, and on YouTube at BaxtyBF1.
And if you guys aren't following any of those channels, what the heck are you doing? Go do it now. And then come back and watch some more of us. Right. We will see you guys in the next one.